Hello all, Zysos here. Today we're bringing another weapon guide. This time it will be on the Sledgeblade. This will be the first melee weapon that we're covering and was released with the release of the game. For too long didn't watch, the Sledgeblade has two main forms of attack. You can, if you're pointing at something and it's within the correct range, of the lunge range, it will do a lunge where you run forward and hit just that thing. And if you aim off of anything, so you're not aimed at anything and click your attack, you have this fairly slow swing that hits a fairly wide area, lingers for a little bit, and you can use that to swing safely at things that you can't approach, because it has a little bit of range. Let's just jump straight into the overview from there. So for the overview, we're just going to go over its stats here. So swing delay, 1.3 seconds. This was 1.4 for levels 1 and 2, but it increases, is decreased by 0.1 seconds after you buy the level 3 upgrade. It's not a very good upgrade. 1.4 to 1.3 doesn't really matter all that much. The lunge range, it's 8 meters at its max, but it was 6 at level 1. At level 2 you got an extra 2 meters of lunge range. This is very good. Lunging with the Sledgeblade is a very powerful tool in your utility belts that you'll want to be using a lot. Lunge speed of 15 meters per second. This is about what the speed that you get reeled in when you're grappling, except unlike a grapple, you don't have to wait for it to start up because the grappling hook has to go travel out when you're grappling, whereas this just immediately starts putting you at full speed. As for damage type, it's crushing, so flesh, armor, traps, it's everything. It's very useful. It means that you're not bouncing off of armor on guards and potentially getting killed by them. There's also, it's not listed here, this has a 2-meter range on its hitbox. There is actually a difference between this and the Fury's Edge. The range is different on them. This has a 2-meter range. Okay, so the first thing I want to go over is the actual lunge on the Sledgeblade here. So you'll see here that we've got a incinerator with Dragon's Breath on it. The reason I am doing this is because if we go into Loadout here, you'll notice I have none of the Kamatachi perks, so this is base. This is exactly what you would have if you had no relevant perks. And if I grapple right at it, and then lunge, I actually make it in time to destroy this, which is very important. Also of note, these all have hot piston. I can actually lunge at these, and I'm never considered to have touched them, even if I hit them at an unfortunate time. So you can safely lunge at the hot pistons as well. One of the times you can't safely lunge, however, let's just trigger this incinerator. You can't lunge into fire. It will immediately kill you. What you can do, however, let's trigger this again, is an unlocked attack. I should probably explain what that is. So, when you're not pointing at something, you still get a swing, and you'll notice that it's quite slow. It actually matches what is on your screen, like you are slowly swinging your sword across the... like the hitbox will match what the sword is doing, so it will slide as you move, and as you move the camera, it'll move with the camera as well. So in this case, if I trigger this, point at this which is destroyed, and then swing and then push my camera to the right, the hitbox actually goes over the trap and destroys it, so I can safely destroy incinerators, even though they're firing, if I'm right next to them. Whereas I can't do that with a lunge. Now up here, there is one issue with lunges at the moment. If you're at a long angle, wide angle like this, let's see if I can actually get it to... There we go. Even though you lunge, you won't actually destroy the trap. You can get around this a little bit by just using the unlock stuff I just talked about then. So let's try that again over here. See? Yep. I've heard you can have some issues with that at max range as well. But there's another lunge. Let's get this time. Yeah. So I swung here and moved my camera over to here so that I could hit this. That's about a 2 meter range, just as an FYI. And that covers the basics. Let's move on to Holocubes. Okay, so with Holocubes, melee weapons have a unique property against them because they are lungeable. So you can use that to determine where they are. So whenever you are in lunge range of a trap, you raise your sword up and your reticle turns red. And that allows you to determine where Holocubes are without triggering them. So this one here can be seen from just pointing my Sledgeblade at it. You lose the sword, but if you have your other weapon up and it's not a melee weapon, because if it was a melee weapon, you'd be seeing that thing's lunge range instead, you can still see the reticle turn red. And the important thing is, if I actually lunge at this, I destroy it, but it's not super important when it comes to Holocubes. Now, this one here, if I lunge at this, I can see where this could actually be a downside. Because I've put the sword on cooldown, but the trap behind it was still able to activate. Whereas if I was to trigger this with something else now that I know what's there, such as the grappling hook, I can attack the trap behind it safely. Which can be important. Sometimes you will lunge at a Holocube and you will die because of it, and this is just a safer way to do that. If you happen to have no other weapons, the grappling hook can trigger the Holocube if needed. I often say one of the worst things you can do when you are fighting plasma sentinels is to run straight at them. But you kind of need to do that to destroy them with a melee weapon. There's just like a short little trick to it. You just hug one of the walls so that they fire here, go to the other side, get close as you can, and then go for the lunge. Now obviously this isn't like the maximum range, and this is a pretty easy setup for me to chase down, but the same basic principle always applies. You want to go as far as you can to one side, so that it shoots directly at you over here, giving you as much room as you can over on the other side of the space that you have to get close enough to actually use the lunge and destroy Plasma Sentinels. So the next thing we're going to be talking about is stacked Warmongers. They can be quite difficult to deal with. This is not an easy thing to record on, but the basic idea is that lunging at them will always kill you. You lock yourself into forward movement and a short delay before you can move away, and because of that, the Warmongers behind the one that you attack will always kill you. Let's just quickly show that off. Let's just let the stack of Warmongers approach me. Kill. It's always going to happen. There's no easy way to get around it. There are, obviously if there was a wider room, I could get them to attack and then dodge the attacks and then take my swings, and that would be a better idea. But in a corridor like this, I can't do that. So the way that I have to deal with this is using unlocked attacks. So I need to swing at the wall, swing across the Warmonger, and that doesn't immediately kill me. And then I can potentially get another one in and kill all the Warmongers. But let's just try this. This is not easy to do. But as you can see, you can kill a big stack of Warmongers. This was only 4, but I think stacks bigger than 4, they are possible, but they're not super likely because they're so weak to grenades. And at that point, you can beat it with other things. But it is still possible. It is still possible, it's just not easy to do. As for loadouts, I recommend 2 different weapons to pair with it, Fury's Edge or Arc Barrier. The reason for these 2 particular ones is that they deal with situations that the Sledgeblade can't. So the Fury's Edge allows you to more safely deal with the things once you get into the final spots that you are sledgeblading into. So Sledgeblade swings in, and then you've lunged in, you're surrounded by traps and guards or whatever, and you can just Fury's Edge them. And because of its really fast swing delay, it's able to deal with them pretty quickly. You could do a similar thing with the Volt Lancer, but I think the deflect projectiles trait helps in this case, and you're not going to be at a significant range, so you don't need to worry. You don't need the extra range of the Volt Lancer, and the deflect projectiles could potentially save you by actually bringing some defense. Maybe you block a bolt shot or another projectile. There's not that many projectiles in the game. Uh, the arc barrier, similar idea. You swing in with the lunge, use the arc barrier to block all the other things that you've just put yourself in danger of. Probably get a perfect block, honestly, most of the time with this, and get the full 2-second duration. But also, it can also really help with certain incinerator setups where instead of dealing with it from the long side, you use the arc barrier to get through the incinerator, and you deal with the incinerator from the other side where you have a direct access to the trap instead of having to go through the flames. Both really good options. I don't recommend the other ones because of the lack of defense that they all provide, and they're not really there's a lot of like overlap between what situations the Sledgeblade is good in that the ranged weapons are also good in. So I'd recommend Fury's Edge or Arc Barrier in all cases with the Sledgeblade. As for perks, Quick Strike's the best. Quick Strike is the best perk you can possibly have on the Sledgeblade. The lunge speed means that you're vulnerable for less time when you lunge. And that means that you're more likely to survive the lunge and actually get it go off, as opposed to getting hit by something while you're lunging. Frenzy is also pretty good because it triggers after you've destroyed a trap, which is just after you've done your lunge, so you're needing to reposition and whatnot, and get out of the danger area that you've just put yourself in. And Frenzy helps with that. It allows you to move a little bit faster until you can potentially get your grapple up or whatever else you need to get out of there. Gap Closer extends the vulnerable duration of lunges, so I wouldn't normally recommend it as a single perk. It's okay when you've already got the two others. So the Kamitachi suit overall still works. Like this, I wouldn't recommend swapping this off just because it makes you more vulnerable while lunging, because it does. Having more lunge range is not strictly negative, but it's also not strictly positive. So I would put that as like the third tier of biolink that you can get for the Sledgeblade. So that's it for the Sledgeblade guide. Next week we'll probably be doing another suit guide. I'm thinking Kamitachi, so look out for that if you're interested in that, and I shall see you then.